So welcome back, everybody. Today we are hanging out with our smart sister, you, and we're going to be talking about some really important topics today. We're going to be discussing femininity, women's wisdom, and beauty. You will be surprised what you're going to learn today from our expert over here. So, hey, you? How are you doing, and how is life treating you in your neck
Life
of the
is
woods?
wonderful. Obviously, with everything that's happening around us and in the world, it is the more important to take time to listen to our own body because it's always easy to let whatever that's happening outside to shake our balance. And so this is perfect. Thank you for creating this time and making or creating this space where we can still connect and realize and understand the power that we have within us. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Of course. You're always welcome here to hang out with us over here on this platform. And so let's start with femininity. Now, you've worked extensively in this field. So I think we can start by you sharing perhaps what is your perception of femininity and how have you seen it evolving over time? What does the
Thank you.
evolution of femininity look like? Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I think there is this misconception, and I think we want to clarify that first, because in terms of the world of the energy, people often hear the word of feminine energy and masculine energy. Um, and I think it is amazing to embrace both. And actually, people talk about when it is balanced, right? When you have all of this feminine and masculine energy within you, that's when you know that you are quote unquote healthy or balanced or like a balanced individual, right? But then the word, in terms of feminine and then femininity, it gets a little bit problematic when it is only assigned to one gender. Does that make sense? So when women can only express their femininity, but not their masculinity, that's when it becomes a problem. The
Okay,
same
got you.
thing, yeah, the same thing with men, when they can only express their masculinity but not femininity, right? And the same thing goes with all genders, right? And so it becomes a problem when you identify as a specific gender and then other people try to, by other people, I mean society and culture, try to assert this is what you should wear. This is how long your hair should be. You should not be putting on makeup or like things like that. So that's what's problematic. And it's even more problematic when you get punished. Like boys, let's say, when they try on dresses, even though in certain cultures, dresses or sarong or like different ways in which, they put outfit, put on certain kind of outfit may not be problematic or in different time, what may look like a skirt in certain culture and then in other cultures that no, you can't do that. And when boys actually do that, they get punished. That's when it's problematic because as an individual, as a person, as a soul, as a human being, we like to try out certain things. Some girls don't like putting on makeup. Some girls love putting on makeup, right? But it's also problematic when people say, oh, no. To be feminist, you should not wear makeup. That's problematic too, right? Because
It's
again, when
problematic.
when people or whatever it is, ideology, whatever you want to call it, try to tell you how to express yourself, something inside you is dying. And what I
Yes.
mean by that is because sometimes I want to put on makeup, sometimes I don't. Even the same
True.
person can wear
Yeah.
different things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when we stop listening to what's going on with the body, that's actually when that wisdom that you're talking about is dying down. We can't be wise anymore because who are we listening to? We have no compass. We have like no direction. So that's
Yeah.
what I mean about femininity and how it could be helpful, how it could be problematic, how it could be used as a tool of power to suppress our power.
Yeah, and I've come to accept, and maybe I've reached a point of acceptance when I look at different cultures and femininity. I see it through the lens of culture, tradition, religion, society. It's really molded by that. And so when now we're in a global world where these cultures are mixing. So what is the norm in your culture is an anomaly. And I like that you brought the concept of the sarong,
Hmm.
and all these different things that are very natural in other cultures, and so when these cultures are blending and your children are hanging out with the sarong culture, they're rubbing onto each other, so they might think this is pretty cool, I want to try it. So I like that you talk about this, that it's not about a dress or this, it's just expression, and it's just, you know it's evolving over time, what is and what isn't, you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking about my culture. And so I will say that I was born and raised in Indonesia, just to
Mm,
give a context for the listeners.
yeah.
And I lived there until I was 22 years old. So
Mhm.
obviously that means that the big part of my upbringing is my Indonesian, culture. And what surprised me was because again, when you were in different countries, you would hear or watch TV about what's like in America or things like that, right? And so we often hear about how here in the United States it is more open in terms of sex and sexuality. Right. So that's
Mhm.
what I heard before coming to the United States. I did travel to the United States before as a tourist, but, obviously it's a different context when you're a tourist.
It is
So when
very,
I,
very different.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
it's very
when I
different.
moved when I was 22 years old, I began to see that when I was in Indonesia, I was living in Jakarta. So again, it's a different context when you're in a big city versus when you're
Mhm,
in rural, when you're in, small town, things like that. So I just want to
mhm.
give that context. But when I was in Jakarta, and I was modeling back then as well, I know it's like, oh my gosh. And I would had shows, I think
Yeah.
in three different New Year's. I can't remember what the years were, but three
Mhm.
different years we were doing um, shows with drag queens, trans, right? And so it was just like for me, it was just part of our my life in some ways, right? And people at the time, obviously there was we talked about backstage certain audiences or certain responses that because there was like certain stigma surrounding drag queens, but
Mhm.
the thing was, and there is this concept of waria in Indonesia, um, where those who are born and assigned the gender of male then wear outfits again that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
understood as feminine, right? But in Indonesia, it was more accepted.
Mhm.
Uh, we were just literally like we didn't even think of that, if that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when I moved and I was like, wow, actually we were more accepting back in Indonesia than when I moved here at the time. So
Mhm.
so that's like one of the things that I kind of like understood, and also highlight the importance of traveling. Because when you travel, again, not just as tourists or just try to like, did I check that, Eiffel Tower? Did I like see this? Like just keep, checking off all this list. But when we actually try to learn and just sit and see how do people react with one another? People
Mhm.
were more visible
Mhm.
in Jakarta. Again, this was in 1999, early 2000.
Mhm.
Again, we had different in Indonesia, I mean, different presidents, different rulers, so to speak. Uh, you know what I mean? And so obviously the context, depending on the rulers,
Yeah.
really shifted. But
Yeah.
that was how we were back then, was more
Mhm.
accepting. Um, People were not bullied or killed to the extent that or kids were here. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. Obviously, it does exist, and there were like scholars talking about
Yeah, of
certain
course. Yeah.
forms of discrimination and things like that. But yeah, that was one thing that I noticed. So thank you for asking that question. And I wonder too, what about you? I would love to hear this one thing I love to learn too. Do you
Yeah.
notice that there are like differences as well?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There are very, very many differences in terms of the what is femininity. And the thing is, when people ask me, people look at Africa as a country, right? So I'll just talk
It
about the
is true
country.
though. When
It
you hear
is true.
from
So
them
I'm
the
going to talk about
announcement,
the
like
country. I'm going
flight
to talk about the
attendants,
country Africa. Okay.
they're like,
So in
in the United
Africa,
States or in Africa.
so in this wonderful country of Africa with 52 states, okay.
Oh no.
Okay, those who know what I'm talking about. The cultures are
Yeah.
very different, and femininity varies across the line. So each country in Africa is very complex. So in one country, you'll see the expression showing up in different ways, and so you may find one tribe is so tight, strict when it comes to how women dress and how women um, even speak to a man, how so that impacts how self-expression can impact your level of femininity because you can't express yourself to the fullest. You have to express yourself within certain parameters. So when I talk about a certain country, you have to give room to know that it could vary from she could do whatever she wants, to she's even more matriarchal per se, to heavy patriarchal, heavy-handed. Okay, so we in Kenya, for example, you have cultures that practice female circumcision. So some would you call female genital mutilation. Is it the
Mhm.
whole country? No, it's maybe one or two tribes out of 48. Okay, so that culture has their explanations behind the tradition and what they perceive as femininity, what they perceive as female empowerment, what they perceive as a good woman, a good wife. And I have to say, this is changing. It has changed dramatically with a lot of knowledge and understanding of a woman's body, the biology of it, the purpose of the clitoris, and all this stuff, and how the life threatening you know circumstances of practicing this kind of practice. So it's shifted tremendously, and they're not really doing it to the degree that they used to. So there's so many expressions there. And then you have cultures where a woman is held in such high esteem, and the more feminine she is, as she expresses herself, it is celebrated, in terms of, how she wears, how she sings, how she dances, how she moves, how she walks, even to her posture. There are women who have special, it's just you're born like that, but they have necks that are really cut like this. And so they're given higher status per se, because they're kind of like, oh, that's really, I don't want to go into the why they
Mhm.
are given that kind of status, but there are different things that a woman's natural beauty, natural expression, as she was born, is kind of attached to certain, you know, femininity within the culture. So a woman who didn't have it in that culture would be like, oh, shoot, why wasn't I born with that? So it expresses itself in so many different ways. And I can't go into 42 tribes in the expressions. It's so complex, and it varies from one to another. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know whether I answered your question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. I love learning different cultures and different historical periods because then you realize all of these things that we're doing. is not
Yeah.
normal. It's not
No.
like it's always been like that all throughout times.
No.
And therefore, we know, well, why is it that we are dressing the way that we do
Mm-hmm.
right now in this time period? Right? And so we begin to ask questions and to understand, how does power work? Does this have anything to do with power, with gender, with patriarchy, right? And how can we sort of really challenge that? It's not just about challenging power per se, but it's about
Mm-hmm.
honoring the wisdom within, because that's like really my main
Yeah.
concern, or my most um I don't know, it's like, what is happening? It's not just it is problematic, but it is
Mm-hmm.
really killing us, really killing our soul, really killing the expression of our souls. And imagine the kinds of things that we can produce. If we are a writer, the kinds of things that we can write. If we are a movie maker, the kinds of movie we can make. If we're an architect, think about like all of these things in Barcelona, and like all of this beautiful, playful,
Oh,
colorful architecture that you
yeah.
can create when you are being encouraged to express different things, rather than following, this is how you're supposed to talk, this is how you're supposed to wear outfit, this is how you're supposed to look. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah. You're very right, because there's so many misconceptions about what femininity is, what beauty is. It expresses itself differently in different cultures, in different environments. Think about you wear your nice, wrap on, during the summertime, your flip flops and whatever, but you can't wear that to the office. Why not? You know what I mean? So we're constantly, I like what you're talking about, because the expression, when you wake up and you feel drawn to express yourself in this way today, why can't you do that and just go to the office and be taken seriously? In your sarong, and, as you look like you on, of course, not a bikini, but, but, and why not even that? Think
Mhm.
about it. There's so many restrictions, and we don't think about it. We have this collective agreement that this is how you dress at the workplace, this is how you dress for leisure, this is how you dress, in the summer, this is acceptable, this is unacceptable, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, and even I love this what you're bringing up as well. Even like at the workplace, I hear, I've never been to Google, but I hear people like who work in Google don't wear the same outfit with people who work at the bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
again, even that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and now I teach at the University of Hawaii, and
Mm-hmm.
students do
Mm-hmm.
actually wear um like really really kind of like the top that may look like a bikini, or it is a bikini, and shorts. They do wear that,
Mm-hmm.
and it is considered um I always don't want to use the word normal, because that means what's not normal and things like that, but it's kind of like, yeah, yeah. And then I often have students who don't wear shoes at all, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it is also part not only of culture, but also for health, But when I wasn't here, I was teaching in Kansas before, I was in Atlanta before. Uh, Rarely, if ever, people wear something that you would consider a bikini, or kind of like a swimwear for your
Mm-hmm.
top.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, I was like, oh, okay. And I, as a teacher, too, sometimes wear flip-flops. I don't wear bikini. I don't wear bikini. I have to say that.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, but I was like, wow, other professors are wearing, flip-flops. I guess I could too. I was like, okay. I was like, okay. I was like wearing flip-flop, and so it was really, like you said, this is really, really interesting. But again, I'm pointing this out not just to like, oh, wow, this is interesting, and wow, but also to understand there are these sort of like set, like you said, agreements that
Mm-hmm.
changes throughout different historical time period, throughout,
Yeah.
culture, throughout history, I mean, throughout geographical locations and all of that. And so why? And I think if we can just ask like why, that would be like, the first step, right? To really understanding how femininity or idea of all of these can be kind of like restraining or suppressing us. I did write though in my latest book, the title is Scarred, a feminist journey through pain, because I talk about, so one
Mhm.
concept that I talk about is called feminist enchantment. And
Yeah.
my proposal in that book is that every single day we have to
Mhm.
practice one feminist enchantment, just one,
Mhm.
just one. And
Mhm.
again, what this is about is like what we talked about, what you mentioned earlier. When we wake up, sure, we can't wear a bikini to the office today. Fine. But what is the one feminist enchantment? One thing that we actually listen to our body, look at our surrounding, and be enchanted just for like a moment. That's all. But it has to be like every single day. So, because if we don't do this every single day, then we start losing that connection, right? With our own inner wisdom, with our body. Then we start having all this pain. And people always ask me when I talked about this book, are you talking about emotional pain or physical pain? And I'm like, I don't know about you. When my heart got broken, like emotional pain, I feel it everywhere in my body, right? And I know what you mean. It's different from diabetes, right? I know, but again, people talk about these days, again, I'm not a doctor, I mean, not that kind of doctor. But people
Mhm.
talk about even diabetes and all this kind of thing. Yes, it is genetic, and yes, it is what you eat, it is lifestyle, but it is also stress. What I mean is like emotional as well. So when I talk about pain,
Mhm.
I can't just talk about, oh, this is just emotional or just physical because of the connection. But what I am saying is that when we don't honor the wisdom within,
Mhm.
see how those kinds of pain show up
Mhm.
in our body, in our psyche, right? Just show up in our life.
Yeah. And I mean, for the person who asked you that question, the psychosomatic symptoms that are attached to emotional pain are real. Your gums could be hurting, and there's nothing wrong with your teeth or your gums. These are plain and simple psychosomatic. So, and there's a laundry list of psychosomatic symptoms that show up in the that have physical manifestation from emotional pain or stress or all this stuff. Yeah. So what you're saying is so important because imagine if you keep manifesting all those different aspects, it gets crazy in your body, So I like the example that you gave. And I was just thinking about what are some of when you talked about this, when you said this is wisdom, it got
Mm-hmm.
me thinking
Mm-hmm.
about what are some of the challenges that women face in recognizing their true wisdom, you know?
Absolutely. It is being told from early on. And this is, I should say, not only women, but also men as well, right? But
Mhm.
here
Of
we
course.
focus only on women. And also I talked about women in my books. So anyway, um,
Yeah, I know
but
what you
from
mean.
early on, we are told this is how you're supposed to feel, this is what you're supposed to do. Even as a child, when they say, no, mommy, I'm full. And then the parents keep, no, you have to finish it. You have to finish it. So from early on, we're being taught not to honor our body. Or even when they say, no, I don't want to hug the uncle, whatever their names are, or even auntie. I don't want to hug them. I just don't want to, even I'm as an adult, I still feel sometimes I don't want to hug you right now. It doesn't mean I don't like you, I don't love you. It's just, I, I'm so exhausted right now. My body's sticky. I just got home from the office. I don't want that proximity. I don't want that, right? But then you
Hmm.
said, oh, but uncle or like auntie just flew all the way from Kenya. Like, how
Hmm.
could you say no? Right? And so we're like, okay, we hug them and then we wear something and then they say, oh, why are you wearing that? You look
Hmm.
like this, you look like, and then we fall in love with this most beautiful person who's kind and generous but poor in this culture. Just like in the telenovela, right? And they say, why? Why do you choose that guy? Like that person can't like feed you, like, this. And so you start think, okay. We can't even love who we love, right?
I
So
swear, are you?
I'm sorry.
You're falling in love with the badass guy. Yeah, yeah. Motorbike.
So
You're having the adventure of your life. Yeah. And your parents are like, you better get serious. This is not the one. And you're like, I'm having the
yeah.
best time of my life. It's a roller
So
coaster. Yeah.
yeah. And even with friendship, right? With friends,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
like, these are the kind of people you want to network with them. Don't network with that people, right? They can't
Yeah.
bring you anything. It's like,
Can you believe that?
but it's
Yeah.
happening. It is
Of
happening. It
course.
is
I
still
know.
happening.
I know.
So how can we honor this wisdom? And the wisdom is so simple. And people say, because right now, all of these
Mhm.
books telling you, or like podcasts, including this one, right now, I'm telling people, listen to your intuition. But the thing is, what people forget, if you have not been listening to your intuition, if you have
Mhm.
not been practicing, please don't just like make decision right now. Oh, my intuition is like, uh, what do you call it? Like, quit my job and move to London. That's what my intuition right now. Well, have you been listening to your intuition for the past 50 years? If not, practice little by little. How do you
Yes.
practice? The
Yes.
practice is that feminist enchantment. The feminist enchantment is as simple as, what do I want to eat right now?
Hmm.
Because even this simple thing, it's like, you know what? It's actually happening this morning to me, to myself. Okay, so I had the Korean galbi. I apologize for those who do not eat meat. I still eat meat, and so I always feel bad. I feel like I always have to apologize. But I already marinate the galbi, which is the Korean meat, the short ribs, so in my fridge. But this morning I woke up, I wanted to eat this. It's called martabak. It's an Indonesian, again, I'm sorry, it's ground beef inside. It had eggs and it has like I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but
No,
I
you're okay. You're good. Yeah.
and then so I said to, oh, I'm gonna go to the market and buy eggs because that's what I want this morning. And then I
Hmm.
opened my fridge and I was like, oh, I have this galbi. You know what? I'll just eat my galbi. But you know what, now after I talk to you, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go after this, I'm gonna go and get that eggs. Because it's as simple as that. Because this happens all the time, right? You know what?
Yeah.
I want that, but oh, it's so tiring. I have to make this one. Why don't I just eat this leftover?
Yeah.
The next day, the same thing. I'm just gonna eat this leftover. Look at the fridge or the freezer. Oh, I have that meat for a month. Maybe it's time to eat that, month-old
Hmm.
meat. And I
Hmm.
do this. I'm just basically telling you my life. Um,
Yeah.
but that's where
Yeah.
the wisdom, where we don't practice intuition, where we don't practice feminist enchantment. How
Yeah.
are we enchanted? Have we been enchanted today? At least just one moment every single day. So again, yes, please do listen to your intuition. But if you have not been practicing, please practice that. You know,
Yeah.
um, where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the park or do you want to go to the gym today, to honor your body? If we have not even been like doing that, and spend time with friends. And I understand, I don't want anybody to be that kind of flaky friends who like, oh, you know what, I don't want to hang out with IU today, so I'm gonna call IU. I don't feel like hanging out with you, right? So I also don't want people to like just like be flaky. There are responsibilities in terms of, again, we live in a community. The thing is, or the collective, meaning that we can't just talk about ourselves, but we have to talk about ourselves as part of the community. Because if you keep not honoring your friends, then you won't have any community, right? And so we always have to um, think about ourselves within the community, because a lot of the time, and I think this, people blame this on, the feminist or feminist movement. Sorry, if I can just drink 1 second.
No, let's go ahead. Mm.
And it is about, oh, women, don't just eat the last slice of pizza. Women, you have to put yourself first. And yes, I agree. But what they forget sometimes is that, yes, when even within, when we put ourselves first, we still
Mm-hmm.
have to think about, okay, what about my kids? So we, again, we are not trained, we are not taught to think about everybody as a collective at the same time, to not give up ourselves, to not give up our kids, or to give up our job, or to, right? And so how, so again, this takes practice, takes practice. How can we honor ourselves while honoring our friends, while honoring our community at the same time? Practice, right? And so, because when we don't, then we, this is where we are right now. We have come to this generation of people who said, just say no, learn
Thank
boundaries.
you. Just
Yes,
say no. And oh
yes,
my God, are you? And that it's so problematic.
yes.
The intolerance,
Hmm.
I find it very interesting that we're at a place of it's all or nothing.
Yes,
That
thank you.
middle
Thank you.
ground is disappearing, and then it's just, back in the day, maybe because I'm a seasoned woman, if I disagreed with you or I didn't like your what you know your whatever you said, I'll just tell you. I'll be like, you that didn't sit very well with me. Why did you do that? Like, what's up with that? And then you would be like, come on now, girl, I didn't mean it like that, this is what I meant, and that's it. But now that conversation never happens because they just ghost you. They just
Absolutely.
didn't talk. Oh, I don't
Absolutely.
like what she said. They don't investigate because most of the time it's miscommunication. In my
Hmm.
experience, a lot of times when things are not communicated effectively or properly, you may get the wrong message or the wrong perception. And also, your perception is influenced by a lot of factors: your culture, your upbringing, your profession, your level of education. The way you look at a problem is different from the way somebody without your background will look at a problem. So when you're communicating, you have that assumption. You know what I mean? It's natural. It's just not assumption, but it's just natural to you to express yourself in a certain way. You've been doing it the whole day. You know what I mean? And then maybe like, she's so arrogant. She's so obnoxious. Using these big words, but they're not big words. You've been writing 5 books for years with big words. It's natural. I try to tell people this. No, she's just being real. She's an
Yeah.
autopilot with her big words.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a theorist, but that's
Yeah,
also there are two things I wanna get to. Like the second one is about the theorist and how women, when we use big words, we are being shamed for it, or we're being called, whatever, like arrogant or whatever. When
yeah,
older white male use theorist, they're often considered as brilliant. How can I follow this guy? How can I like write like him? It is
yeah.
true. It is happening even in my own classrooms. When
Wow.
because I use women of color a lot, obviously.
Mhm.
But the problem is a lot of the time in in certain classes, women of color's writings are often used to illustrate the hardship of their lives, but not how they theorize. So when they actually use big words, not to talk about just about their lives, but how they theorize about this, about that, then people are, it turned them off. It's like, it's sort of like, oh, like what? Oh, I don't understand. She's writing in this like very hard, difficult language. Why can't she write in accessible language? Versus when we read big theorists who have become canonical and like classic, these are very difficult to understand too.
Mhm.
But people think that they're brilliant and all of that. So that's the second thing that I want to,
Yeah,
well, anyway, so the first thing, uh, what you mentioned, which is very, very important, is that uh, back in the day, you and your girlfriends or your friends or your family would just say, hmm, the way that you said it, or what do you mean by that, right? So you you
yeah,
you
exactly.
talk about something that hurts your feeling. But again, you have practiced these kind of communication
Yeah.
with your friends. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what I'm talking about earlier, is that we don't even have that practice, even on social media, and especially on social media, because that is, I would want to say, the main mode or platform to communicate these days, or texting, this and that. And people don't have, and even sometimes I start texting and I said, you know what, I'm just going to pick up the phone, because it is actually harder to talk about and have this kind of conversation when you're just texting or writing or posting and things like that. So we
Mhm.
are actually out of practice in terms
Yeah.
of having the
True.
conversation that you have, right? And so
Mm.
again, we don't want to start like tomorrow, like, oh, what you said hurt me. For sure they will ghost you, right? But we can sort of like, we begin that practice by saying, hey, I actually want to practice a different kind of communication, this or that, maybe they'll be open to that, so that they understand, oh, when they point this out, you know what I mean? And so it has to be, kind of like when you go to like a couples therapy or couples counseling, and both of you are reading the same book and practicing the same thing. That is
Mhm.
sometimes how things happen, because both of you are willing to learn a new way of communicating with one another, right? And then you
Mhm.
begin practicing it. And then maybe it works, maybe it won't, right? But same
Mhm.
thing with friends too. If we just like sort of start doing all these things, they're like, oh my God, what's got into her? Like, this is too crazy for me, so that, like what you said, is practice, practice, practice. Then we can feel safe, comfortable, even saying that, wow, what you said didn't sit well with me. Even that is hard, right?
Yeah, but that's quite interesting because this is a culture of avoidance, and we're talking about wisdom. How do you recognize your wisdom? How do you? I know you've already given us, the way, one of the ways people can start achieving it, like the baby steps with the enchantment process. But I don't think you can achieve a lot of this wisdom and also, get your intuition to get sharper and sharper through avoidance. You know what I mean? you,
Hmm.
you can't avoidance, whether it's in your health or your work or anything, even sports, anything you want to do. I don't think avoidance works. And so if we're in a culture of avoidance where you have to walk on eggshells, I think then we're in big trouble.
Absolutely. And when you said that, my mind goes directly to cancel culture,
Yeah.
because we are so afraid of being canceled, right? And
Mm-hmm.
here's the other thing. The cancel culture a lot of the time is about not having that grace for when people make mistakes. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know anybody, at least in my life, in my real life, including myself, who have never made mistake in their entire lives. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
anybody who've never made
Not in this
mistakes?
realm. I don't think it exists in this realm that we live
Yeah,
in.
that's true. That's true. Right?
This is a
I
realm
love
of
that. I love
mistakes,
that. I love that answer. Brilliant. Brilliant. So, wow, right? We're not supposed to make mistakes. And what you said also remind me of, wisdom comes from mistakes.
Yeah.
Sorry, learning from your
From my-
mistakes.
Yeah.
So if you've never made mistakes, you've never learned from them, your own or others, your own or others. But somebody has to make mistakes, right?
A
Then
lot
there's
of
no wisdom.
inventions
Yes,
and innovations came from mistakes.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's brilliant. That's brilliant, right? So if we are creating this culture where we don't want to be canceled, we don't want to make mistakes so we don't get canceled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to cultivate that wisdom? Because
True.
again, if we're not really living our lives, and like you said, avoidance, if we're avoiding problem, if we're avoiding traveling, if we're avoiding this, avoiding whatever it is that we're avoiding, then what are we actually going to learn? Where is the experience going to come from? Right? Sure, you can say wisdom. I can read, I use books, right? But then, unless you actually, I think there is like a saying that says you can consult all the maps in the world, but
Yeah.
unless you go out there and travel, you won't really understand the map. You won't really, learn anything. And the same
I
thing with
love
books.
that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because we
Yeah.
have a saying here that wisdom is knowledge applied.
I love
So
that.
you
I
can
love
read
that.
all the books, but you have to, there comes to a point where you have to move into application.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in
And then
fact, some
you will make mistakes
yes,
and get
yes,
wiser.
absolutely. Absolutely,
As you go.
absolutely. Even with GPS on, like literally on, I made the wrong turn, like literal wrong turn. And that is the GPS on, meaning like the intuition is on, right? Like if we were taking that example to our lives, even with the intuition on, the intuition telling you don't go out tonight, don't go out tonight, and you still go anyway, right? Don't make a right, like go straight. Like anyways. Um, so I think and also have that compassion for ourselves when we make mistakes. It's easier
Mhm.
for me to say that, but the last time I made a mistake, I was like, "Oh, I can't believe you did that." And then I was like, "Okay, calm down. It's not calm down. So I have to like have all these talks. But what I was going to say earlier was a lot of the time when I read books, I kind of get the idea, but then something happened to me, and then I remember that book, and I said, "Oh, that's what that person probably meant when they said this." Like I
Yes.
get it. I actually get it when
Yeah.
that similar things happen to me.
Yeah.
So, but again, this can never happen if we avoid, right? If we just sort of like
Mhm.
avoid, everything. And yes, I understand that there are these things called toxic behavior, toxic environment and everything. Um, Also though, like what you're saying is that how can we, before we just like, oh, you're toxic, I'm just going to be out of here, things like that. How can we kind of like have that conversation, like you said, before that, um, before ghosting them and have that conversation? I do have to say, yes, I also can feel it sometimes, even in my body, when I'm in danger and that person is toxic and I just leave,
Mhm.
right? Again,
Yeah.
that's wisdom. That
And
is wisdom.
intuition. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if we
Yeah.
don't have that wisdom, then that's when people just like keep cutting people off because like, okay, out, 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 I don't want you because there's no wisdom in knowing, is this person worth our 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 years, or five never, right? And so
Mhm.
it's like, that is wisdom. That is wisdom. If we
Mhm.
don't have that wisdom, then we are just either, like you said, all or nothing. No, 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 without giving anybody a chance. Then we don't have our community because nobody's good enough for us because we're so perfect. We never make mistakes.
And then you're lonely and wondering why you're all alone.
That's true.
And then we
That's
have all
true.
these issues with people who are lonely and have to
Hmm.
open clubs to make friends. You see,
Yes, yes,
it's
yes, yes,
interesting.
yes.
It's an
Yeah,
interesting transition. It's a slow moving process, but you can see where it's headed because of the lack of tolerance, and acceptance that, IU is different. She just does that stuff different.
mm-hmm,
And I don't
mm-hmm.
have to like it. But also, when I started observing, dynamics, relationships, colleagues or friendships and family and all that, I realized that sometimes the people who say, "Oh, that person is toxic" or whatever, it's a control mechanism. Because sometimes if you observe, this person maybe is just not interested in fitting in. They're just authentically them, and it bothers people who are conformists. So
Absolutely.
they are offended by your authenticity. They're offended by you just moving like you move, by saying, I know you're a vegetarian, you eat meat, I respect that, but they're different cultures, they're different dietary needs, our bodies are different. My body responds differently to certain foods, so I'm just going to eat what works for me. I'm going to honor
Absolutely.
the meal, I'm going to honor the animal, but and also I need to remind you, vegetarians, plants are alive and well as well.
Yes,
you know
yes,
they
yes.
breathe, they talk, they dance, they
Mm-hmm.
speak, they do all that. So in this realm, everything we consume has an essence. And so
Absolutely.
just respecting people's dietary needs, their, everything. And that's the thing I find interesting, that if you're not like me and you don't do as I say, then I got a problem with you. I
Yeah.
find that very limiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I also always try to do is to give the same person like another chance, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes sometimes they're like you said, it's funny. The way that they eat is like or whatever, and it just like bothers you. Okay, well then don't have any lunch appointments with them. Go like walk, on the park, and that's how you hang out with them. Just walking, so you don't have to hear how they like chew their meat or whatever, right? And so
Gosh,
yeah,
yeah.
no, meet them at their best, right? And if
Mhm.
they're like love canoeing and things like that, yeah, let's do that instead of like eating and hearing because again, my quirks and how you chew may bother me, but it doesn't bother the next person, right? And so it's
True.
like what you're saying is but I love this idea so much that you're saying is that a lot of the time what bothers us is when they show up with their authenticity. But that's so like goes against all of this slogan that we read these days, like be authentic, be yourself,
No,
this, that, right? But then
no
when
one
you
wants
really
authenticity.
are,
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of times, the things people say, oh, I love honesty. You try and be honest. Tell the truth. Tell the truth and shame the devil.
yes,
Yeah. A lot of things
yes,
that people say, they don't really want exactly that. People, yeah, authenticity? No.
yeah. And that's again going back to wisdom, going back to that. But one thing that you mentioned earlier about our bodies are different, and I want to let you and the listeners in on a secret, which is I had a body image issue, and that is my first book that you showed me earlier. Thank you so much for having that. It's about beauty because
Mhm.
I literally would look at myself in the mirror and I would cry, right? Because
Oh.
I wasn't pretty enough, this enough, that, like I had body image issues. And then I went to Hawaii. So this could be like maybe 14 years ago or something like that. Before I moved here. So it was, I was here on a vacation one time and I went snorkeling. And that was the moment that was most healing because I saw all these fish. They had puffer fish. They had
Oh.
like fish that's like so long and thin, pencil fish.
Mhm.
Some have this kind of color, some have that kind of color. And I said, you know what? Look, I saw. And at the time, I felt so peaceful being in the water. At the
Mhm.
same time, I saw each fish is like not minding anybody else's, others fish business. And they
Mhm.
all literally look different.
Yeah.
And they're just like all, I mean, they probably have drama within the king. I mean, the fish kingdom. I don't know that. I didn't speak the, fish or like Dory language. Like I have no idea, or Nemo, I have no idea how they speak.
Mhm.
But that was the moment when it like was literally healing. Again, I'm not saying that now I don't like criticize my body, like now I'm completely
Yeah.
healed. No, because I still internalize that. And sometimes it's just like that automatic thing, like I criticize, oh, this or that. But for the most part, that was the
Mhm.
moment that I said, this is my body. Because I
Yeah.
got teased a lot because of my nose, because Indonesians a lot of the time they want pointy like European nose. So my nose is like too flat. My
You got a
lips are
beautiful nose.
thank you. But like and then my lips are too thick, too big. Like I got teased over and over and over and my body this and even when I dare to set and this was when I was young, right? So I said, when I grow up, I'm gonna be beautiful, right? Like so I dared saying that. And that
Mhm.
person said to me, you will never be beautiful. Your bone, like everything, you will never grow up to be beautiful, right? So as a
Oh my
child, right?
goodness.
I I didn't say anything after that. And I like
Yeah.
literally almost wanted to cry.
Of
But again,
course.
so like all of these things, right? Even when you dare saying things, they like, shut you up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But but I then learned to, you know what? My bone is the way that they are. My nose, my whatever is the way that they are. And even my body. My body was like, oh my God, your body like this, like And I just like, you know what? This is I'm just like one of these fish. Sometimes I'm like a puffer fish, like my belly is bigger than the rest of my, my body or whatever it is. It's like this is me and that's just you. Sometimes you, and it also goes to, because a lot of the time the media, uh what do you call it, like represent or paint a picture of people who are
Yes.
overweight as this way, as that way, as they're this.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
you also can then say, that is their body. No matter how hard they try to diet their way, this is their body. They have like a threshold of, no matter they diet, they go back to that, like, things like that. So the same thing, right? And some people are like super, super tiny. No matter how much they eat, they keep going back to that,
Yes.
size.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's, we're just
True.
all these different kinds of fish, sometimes. Again, I'm not saying that there are problems with the food industry that, make you that with like the additives, with the coloring,
Yeah.
with preservative, I'm not saying that there isn't that issue with
No.
that. There are issues with that, but I'm just talking about the body that we're in. And I can look like this. This is just the way that I look. My bone is like this, and this is me, and this is
Yeah.
me, and that is
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and that is it.
Yeah.
So
That is it. Because I'm so glad that you transitioned beautifully into the beauty, the topic of beauty and image. Because, when you look at the trillions and trillions of euros or dollars that are pumped into the industry of beauty and image, it's no wonder women are just this surgery and that surgery, and I need this done, and the lips need to be puffed up. They told you your lips are big, but now everyone's puffing up their lips. You know, it's
somebody
again,
actually asked me, did you had your lips done? And I'm like, no.
no, if only
But
they
you're
knew
right.
the story, right? You had to go into a pufferfish experience. That's what we say. You never know who you're talking to. You know what I
Yes,
mean? And their
yes.
story. But this is, the advertising industry makes billions and trillions out of creating these images of beauty, and what is beauty, what is affluent, dress like this, look like this, if you're big, you're not elegant. Who said, all these things that then damage the self-esteem of a lot of, mostly women. We know it's targeted towards women and girls mostly. So then their image is damaged, and then they have products to fix the damage. The confidence is gone, self-esteem is gone. So then you fix it with the surgery. And, it's really an interesting, paradox when you look at it. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And when you were talking about beauty and body image, I was thinking about, so I wanted to ask you, so how would you define beauty beyond physical appearance?
So I am glad you asked that, because that specific questions about beyond physical appearance. Because if not, I would say, first of all, let's
Mhm.
just not even go there in terms of beauty. What does beauty look like if it's like physical appearance? Because no
Mhm.
matter how you would define it, you're always excluding somebody else. So let's never go to the beauty in terms of physical appearance. So I love, 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 love your question about how
Okay.
can we go beauty beyond physical appearance, right? Because for
Mhm.
me, beauty is this sort of like, again, notions of enchantment, right? When I have a conversation with someone and I'm enchanted, like actually right now with you, I'm having that moment of enchantment. I was like, wow. Like throughout this conversation that we had in less than an hour, I often say, wow, wow, you're
Mhm.
taking me out of, my daily life, like, oh my God, the stress of this, the stress of deadlines, and
Mhm.
into this conversation. That's what enchantment is. I mean, literally, the definition of enchantment is being taken out of this wherever you are. And in my book, obviously, it's about pain. So you're being taken out of your own pain. You forget your pain that moment because you look this beautiful,
Mhm.
like sunset, or having this beautiful conversation with your friend. Actually, I just used the word beautiful, beautiful conversation with your friend, or whatever that is. That, so for me, beauty is those that could enchant you, meaning
Nice.
like you like, wow. It could be a cup of tea, right? Or like the actual
Mhm.
cup, not the tea inside. Sometimes the tea, now they have this thing called like tea bloom or something where there's like this beautiful, gorgeous, flowers inside a teapot. That's
Okay.
enchanting. I actually had that last night, and I was literally watching as the flowers bloom inside this transparent cup, the teapot, and I was like, enchanted by the process. So beauty for me are like whatever that thing, dead or alive or whatever that is, it's like you said, it's beyond physical appearance. So to me, like it felt more like energetic, like things that could just like wow you. The same thing with decoration, the same thing with architecture, and sometimes it's different colors. Sometimes all white makes you like wow, sometimes all black makes you like wow, sometimes it's like all different colors, like green with pink, and you're
Mm,
like, and this happens, and sometimes I take pictures. I never thought green and pink would, like pastel green, pastel pink, would look good together, and I stopped, wow, took picture.
mhm.
That's beauty. So
Yeah.
that's beauty.
Sure.
And the same thing also for like when we experience another person.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Wow. And sometimes I can't describe it. It's the way they talk, maybe. And again, it's no one way of talking. Sometimes someone
Yeah.
talks like me,
I
like,
think I know what
you know,
you,
and it's
yeah, I know
wow.
what you
Sometimes
mean.
it's like very elegant, which I'm trying, failed all the time. But, sometimes someone says very elegant, very slow, and it's just like, wow, it's like meditative. I want to be like that person, but I haven't, and I talk like this, I laugh so loud. By the way, there's like when I was in college, someone literally said, "Oh, I don't like IU because she laughs too loud."
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah,
so
people don't
again,
like laughter. They don't like laughter, but thanks to a lot of our guests over here, I know the spiritual connection to laughter.
hmm
It's
hmm
powerful. And so
absolutely.
also you need to be, well, I've learned a lot from a lot of our smart guests. Laughter is a powerful, powerful weapon. 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 So
We're
beware of
laughing.
those. Exactly. Beware of
hmm
those who do not like laughter. Because
Yes.
how is laughter offensive to you?
hmm
Yeah,
hmm
yeah, it's very
hmm
interesting because a lot of times laughter is infectious, if you notice. So if it's offensive to you, something is, yeah, I'll leave it there because I'll
Yeah.
let you go on. Yeah, it's very interesting. Look it up. I know you're an
Yeah.
agent. Yeah, it's really interesting. Laughter. Yeah. And
We're
that's why,
laughing.
and especially women and children, but anyone, even men, but there's
Yeah.
something to it because again, biology and chemistry, energy, like a child's energy is different from a grown up. You know what I mean, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And so
Yeah.
it's like not just about laughing out loud, but living out
Mm-hmm.
loud, right? Living out
Mm-hmm.
loud meaning like what is it that you really want to express? Let that, be expressed. But
Mm-hmm.
again, don't just like jump into it. Have that practice so that when that intuition is actually saying, because sometimes again, people say, how can you tell if it's desire, if you want to eat that ice cream right now, or it's actually
Mm-hmm.
your intuition or your wisdom telling you you want to eat that ice cream because you need the calcium, you need the dairy, you need whatever, your body actually needs it, right? How can you
Uh-huh.
tell? You know
Yeah.
what? It's just wisdom. It is just wisdom, right? And so again, if you have not been practicing it, start practicing it. And it is just so amazing the kinds of things when I listen. Again, I don't always listen, things that happen because I decided to go on this date or this time. I meet certain people just because I listen. Sometimes it's like you have to go now, you have to go now, you have to go. And here's a very sad story actually. So I've been traveling. I had, sorry, I'm back now.
Yeah.
I had been traveling, and for some reason in October, I have this strong thing. Like I have to go back to Indonesia. I have to go. I have to go. I have to go. Of all the countries, as I mentioned, I was visiting different countries in Africa, and I was planning on like going to South America and different countries. And then
Mm-hmm.
I went in October, and my father died in November, so just a few months
Oh,
ago. And then
wow.
my brother said after the fact, he said,
Yeah.
like you before you went in October, you kept saying, "Oh, I want to go to Indonesia. I want to go." Like it's just like you kept saying that, you kept saying like it's just like you
Yeah.
have to go. And I was planning on going to Indonesia in December, and I did.
Wow.
And so I was like, for some reason, I just have to go. I have to go. And that
Yeah.
happened. And so I was there when he died. I mean, it wasn't, we always have regrets afterward, like certain things that I should have said, like things like that. So I still had
Yeah.
those, like there was no
Yeah.
closure. Like I wish I had said, I had
Yeah.
that. I'm not saying that, if I had listened to my intuition, I probably would have said those things that I wanted to say. But
Yeah.
anyway, but again, that's just an example for me of like when that call is strong and I kind of like, okay, let's just, move things around and let's just go there in October. And that happened. So start listening because again, like I said, I'm just repeating myself here. You never know who you meet, what happens, whatever it is, when you actually listen to that wisdom within you.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And as you were talking, when you got that first intuition, the first word that came to me was obedience. You know, like just being obedient to the intuition, because a lot of people brush it aside and just say, ah, it's just a thought. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
But if you
Hmm.
just, if you pay attention to it, certain things will keep coming back and giving you more clarity. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
And
it's
as
about honoring. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, no, that's fine. I was gonna ask you because I know we have one leg out the door, right? I was
Yes.
gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you before you head out. So, how can how can one balance societal expectations? Because I mean, culture is real, religion is real, community is real, traditions are real, right? And
Hmm.
the pressure can be, it can get to boiling point, right? Let's just
Hmm.
be real. So how can one balance these societal expectations with actually expectations of beauty or femininity, everything we've been talking about, including being authentic, with
Hmm.
actually um, being in their own person, living based on their own personal standards. You have your own
Absolutely.
standards of what is good for you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the easiest answer in practice to that is just checking in with yourself every single time when you don't feel like you want to do this. So let's say, you know what, everybody expects me to wear this kind of things at the wedding, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. Then you ask yourself, okay, so what is the worst thing that could happen, and will I be willing to, do that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, so for the wedding, people will probably like, oh my God. And then my mom will probably like yell at you and whatever. And then what else? And then what else? Right. And then what else? Right. And so, because sometimes a lot of the times we make all this fear to be bigger than it is, right? Because literally to the wedding, right? Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, like, what's going to happen? And
Mm-hmm.
then let's say, okay, I want to wear a bikini to work. And then what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
This. Okay, my supervisor is going to say this. Okay. And then what else? And then they could fire me. If they could fire you, right? If they could fire you, am I going to be okay if they're firing me? And you said
Yeah.
no. Okay. No. The answer is no. Because then we have to so in my book, it's actually a textbook, but I talk about not just about the choices, because people always talk about, what do you want? It's all about choices. We have the right to choose. It's not just about the choice, but also
Mhm.
consequences. They're both C, choice and
Yes.
consequences. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I want to make this choice, but what is the consequences? So all you want to think in that term. But then the other check-in is throughout the day, have I always and only do all these things because of all of these things that people want me to do? If that is, what about the next day? What about the week? If you feel that way for the entire week, can
Mm-hmm.
you find maybe a different job, a different partner, a different society, a different culture, a different country? For those of us who've moved, I moved from Indonesia to United States. I also was living in Canada, and then and I moved back to America. We know the possibility of moving. and sometimes just a neighborhood. If everybody here, you have to drive a Mercedes or, those cars that I don't even know the brand and, like so expensive. I don't even know that they exist. Then I
Mhm.
feel pressured to wear this way, to drive this car. Maybe I can move into a different neighborhood. Maybe if I get all stressed out because people in this condo, they want to recycle in a certain way and I don't want to recycle in that way, can I move to a different condo? So that's why check in, check in, check in. Check in like every single like things that happen throughout the day, but then also check in for, few days because sometimes throughout, like maybe Monday and Wednesday, I have to do all these things, but maybe Tuesday and Friday, or at least Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? But if Monday to Sunday, there's no space for you to reflect or to be yourself, maybe you
Mhm.
should get out of your parents' house and rent your own place so that you can wear whatever you want, or that in-laws, or maybe you're that bad in-laws that tell people what to do, right? And so
Yeah, it's
so
reverse. Yeah.
there, practice,
Mm.
practice, practice, practice,
Mm.
checking in, practice doing this. And then maybe if you want to color your hair red, maybe have a highlight of red just here and see what everybody else thinks, right? And so there are ways. But
Yeah.
so I love your question is, okay, so there are ways to balance this.
Yeah.
How can we do that? So that
Yeah.
should be a question, like you said, for all of us, everybody, every single
Yeah.
day, ask that question. How can I
Yeah.
do it in this culture, in this place right now? If not, how can I move to Kenya, right? Find out what are the visa, what are the this, what are the whatever that is. Find out. Maybe not different country, maybe just a different state, maybe just a different city, maybe just a different whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
anyways.
I love your answer to that question because you've also given a lot of tools. I mean, you've told people to take inventory of their day, know what's going on, but you've also, what I got from you that is also very interesting is you have to also be reading the energy because there's some countries that actually fit your energy. It fits your temper, it fits everything you love. If you love it warm all summer, there are countries that will give you that. If you love skiing in the mountains, then you need to be around the Alps. You know what I mean? So I like that. And then that will also change your maybe your confidence level, your self-esteem you have because you're not dealing with all this other stuff. So I like that. I like that you've explained it like that. I like it.
Yay! Yay! And to honor even when ourselves have changed. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, I love the beach and then now, after my travel this year, I was like, wow, I love the mountains.
Thank
So I have
you.
to figure that out. I have
Yes.
to figure that out now. So I'm
Yes.
in crisis mode right now, but I'm just kidding. I'm not in a crisis mode. I'll
No, no,
see.
no.
Yeah, but it's okay to change. It's
Oh
okay to
my God, I
change.
love that you have said that because, and this is a great way to end it because a lot of people are told stick to the plan. Oh my God. Yeah, they're told stick to the plan, or you need to finish what you started. And I'm like, but it is changing. Why should they stick? That's when your beautiful dream becomes miserable. It becomes like just labor, like work, because you're not moving.
Mhm.
I love that. Like it's okay to change. You don't have to
Absolutely.
make cookies because your original bakery was making cookies. You can decide to make sandwiches. Who cares? Fruit salad, But people tell you, no, you need to stick to the cookies. Stop being all over the place.
Absolutely. That is
Yeah, I
brilliant. That is
love that.
brilliant.
That's a
Thank
good
you.
one. Yeah,
Thank
I
you for
hope
this
our listeners.
conversation. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
this. And I was like
yeah,
laughing. I was enchanted. I really,
yeah.
really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you for the work that you're doing for hosting all these different conversations. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for
You're
that.
welcome. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And thank you once again, IU. So to all our listeners, that was it for today. This was our smart guest, IU. And as always, all her information and her website, her books, and all her work will be in the description. So make sure to check on in the description. Stop by, have a look, see whatever floats your boat. Reach out if you're brave enough and bold enough to do that. She's cool, people. So, if you feel like you want to chat with her, just reach out. She's really cool. So, that's it for today. Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you.
Evenings come, stars are twinkle, dinner on the stove. We talk about our dreams and plans, the future we both hope.